y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Pope, coming at you here, winding trapping season down, actually. And I know that, even though trapping season's winding down, and I say that, you get spring beaver season that comes on up north, and then I know there's a lot of folks listening that probably have the, a wildlife management bent in mind that, we're looking at predator reduction in anticipation of nesting and fawning season. So we got those things coming up too, which leads into supporting our sponsors, Cots Bros Lures, top-notch bait and lure makers, as well as fast shippers. I got a message the other day from one of the listeners with a picture of his brand new order of Cots Bros Lures. So I told him he was going to be better be getting the skinning knife ready. But so be sure to check Cots Bros out. If you need anything last minute for trapping season, I'm telling you, if you get it ordered tonight, it's going to get here in the next couple days in time for you to use it this week. But also, if you're prepping for any kind of spring line, whether it's a fur line or a predator line, they'll fix you up. So, and also in trying to look ahead and anticipate, knowing that the nesting and fawning season is coming, and there's a lot of folks that are interested in predator reduction at that time period. I haven't delved into it yet, but I have got a folder full of research papers on compensatory reproduction. And so that's a fancy way of saying, it's specifically around coyotes, but increasing birth rates, I guess you could say, or litter size, maybe a better term. But I'm anxious to kind of dive into that and see, what some of the research says about that, what some of the findings are among, about, how litter sizes may be impacted by, different management techniques and regimes. So, got some of that coming up. I'm trying to work out kind of a little bit of schedule and get ahead of things, and so I've also got in mind, once we kind of wrap up first season anyway, delving in a little bit to the predator season, pre-fawning, pre-nesting, and then also I'm going to spend some time and hit a few interviews on the nuisance side of trapping, and kind of the business aspect of trapping from maybe from a little bit of residential as well as more of a wildlife management aspect. So hopefully that's going to be of interest to you, and we'll get a lot of good information and good feedback out of that. I think as I've been working on growing my own nuisance business, and there's some things that I've done and changed, and just some mindset things that I feel like are helping me, and then they talking to some successful people in the role, and also looking at how what you want out of the business, what you're after, and how that could influence how you operate. So anyway, that's just a few things that I have got in mind. As always, if you've got ideas about the podcast, ideas of topics, shoot them to me. Send me an Instagram message or Facebook message, or shoot me an email at chris@coyotetrappingschool.com, and I'll try to see if I can work those in best I can. I aim to please, and that's what I'm here for. But so, just talking about topics, as I was looking through my analytics, is the fancy internet word for kind of looking through the statistics from my website and the podcast. Recently, some of the most searched and most downloaded and most listened to episodes have been around trap selection, and what's the best trap for a coyote. And so that's one thing that I've been thinking on a little bit, and I already had some notes, and so I sat down and I hope for all you old listeners and existing trappers that this is not a this doesn't bore you to death, but I think this will be valuable for new trappers and people that are trying to get their mind around what equipment they need and how they can get started. Because let's face it, as trappers, we got to get more people doing this if we want this thing to survive. There's only a handful of us out there, and we're keeping all this stuff to ourselves, and we're not encouraging new trappers. Then, as the antis come with their legislation like they've been bringing hard lately, who's going to support what we're doing? So talking about trap selection, and I'm going to be kind of leaning towards, because that, especially in my opinion, with the fawning season and all coming up, I feel like that's a lot of what people are interested in is coyote traps. What's the best coyote trap? And in general, if you're setting a trap for a coyote, you've got just as good of odds of catching a fox, a bobcat, a raccoon, a possum, a skunk. Most fur bearers are attracted to those same sets that you make for, it's going to be hard unless there's not anything but coyotes in your area to just catch coyotes. There are some things you can do, but still, you're going to wind up, if there's possums around, if you're trapping in the South, you're going to catch possums. That's the best way I can put it there. But first and foremost, when you're trying to decide what traps you're going to buy, what traps you need, the first thing you got to do is check your state regulations. This varies pretty widely by state, but there are a lot of states that do have trap size regulations and restrictions. Georgia, my home state, being one of them. So there's a maximum jaw spread that you can set on land. So we're kind of plugged into a number 2 size trap, basically, or smaller. Can't use over that on land. And I do have a link on my website. I'll drop a link in the description below as well, but I've got a link, it's either to my resources page or my getting started page, and I've got a map of the U.S. and each of the states. You can click on your state and it should take you to your state's trapping regulations. So I'll drop that down below, and if you're wondering what your state's trapping regulations are, click your state, and that should be kind of a quick and easy way, because sometimes trying to find trapping regulations are not the easiest thing to find. Some states are a lot better than others at their online presence and their online availability. But so that's my legal disclaimer right off the bat is you need to make sure that you're complying with the regulations in whatever state you're trapping in. So beyond that, everybody's got an opinion. First and foremost, everybody's got an opinion. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are indifferent. But I would just say take that with a grain of salt. And that goes for whatever I'm telling you too. Don't just take something that somebody says is gospel and run with it. Do some research on your own. Try to kind of validate or verify that from other sources before you go buying off on it. Because traps are a serious investment, but it's something that's gonna last you for years and years. So spending the money up front is, on the long term, it's not going to be as much as it seems like initially. But one thing that I've noticed as reading and studying a little bit more from kind of the professional trappers is, a lot of those pro trappers are going to tell you to go with the biggest trap that you legally can or possibly can. O'Gorman, I got the hoofbeats of a wolfer right here, and that's him. Number 4s, but he's trapping out west. He's trapping in heavily coyote areas, and he's got some pictures in there of coyotes caught by the elbows and by the knees, and just kind of odd catches that if you're trapping in general, you want to catch is a catch. If you caught that coyote and you're holding him, that's what you want. But definitely a smaller trap is not going to produce that for you. So that being said, when you look at the cost side of it, the bigger the trap, the more expensive it is too. So I know for everybody, cost is something to consider, and there's costs either way. And you know, the pros recommend, a lot of the pros, biggest trap you can get, go with it. I'm not a professional by any means, and I am saddled with state jaw spread restrictions. And so what do people tend to do? They tend to recommend what they know. And so if you watch my videos, that's what I've done. You know, I've with our jaw spread restrictions, we're limited to a number size 2 or smaller trap. Initially, when I first got started, I was through some of the guys in the Georgia Trappers Association. A lot of those guys were running 1 3/4 Victor modified traps, and so that's what I took off with. And I had a couple dozen of them and plugged along, and then the MB550s came out, and actually did some trading and got my hands on some of them. And that's kind of been my go-to trap from here on out, is those MB550s. And so, you know, if you watch my videos, that's a lot of times what I'm recommending. Not necessarily because, well, I do think it's a better trap than some other traps. But again, I'm partially biased because I don't have a lot of experience with some of those other traps, especially those larger traps. So, I do feel like, though, those jaw spread requirements are beneficial in certain situations. Here in Georgia and in a lot of states in the southeast, you know, we have a very thriving gray fox population, and gray foxes tend to have kind of small, kind of frailer bones, and they're more susceptible to foot damage than some other animals are. So that's one scenario where, you know, a number 2 size trap is all you want. You don't want more than that, because it can get hard on gray fox. And so I know, you know, in some areas of the South, even in gray fox country, some guys are running like the MB650s and a little bit bigger trap, and that's fine, to each his own. But that's definitely one thing that as a trapper, a responsible trapper and outdoorsman, you need to take into consideration and keep in mind when you're making your trap selection is, you know, yeah, I want to catch coyotes, but what else could I catch? Like I say, if you're trapping, any other predator is going to be attracted to your coyote sets, whether that goes down to a gray fox and a possum, that goes up to a wolf if you're in wolf country. So, you know, knowing what your other potential kind of incidental catches may be needs to also drive what trap you choose. So, if you're in the Midwest, you're targeting coyotes, and there's mostly coyotes, maybe a few red foxes here and there, but mostly coyotes, definitely get away with a bigger, you know, a number 3 size trap, MB650, a number 3 size trap. And if you notice, a lot of guys that trap the Midwest, and you know, that's kind of their go-to, whether that's the No BS K9 Extremes, or a number 3 Bridger, just a true number 3 Bridger, or the MB650s. They're running those little bit bigger size traps, 4-coil traps, and they're hammering coyotes forevermore, hammering coyotes, ain't no doubt about it. That's a good option. But if you're in the southeast, and I think there's a lot of y'all listening that are in the southeast, you know, you got just as you put a set out, put a good coyote set out, dirt hole set. You're just as liable to catch a coyote, a coon, a possum, a fox, gray fox, red fox, bobcat, skunk, the neighbor's cat, the neighbor's dog. Like I said, you got all the more incidentals. I guess that, you know, that could be viewed as some of the blessing and the curse of being in the southeast. We do have such a great and widely varied fur bearer population and fur bearer species diversity. It's one thing I like, because, you know, it keeps your catches up, and keeps you guessing. You never know. You know, if you're just trapping coyotes, obviously I would never complain about a coyote line and catching a coyote, but It is fun pulling up and not knowing, or if you can catch a bobcat or a gray fox or whatever. That's something that I definitely do enjoy. But those are the kind of things that we don't always think about as trappers and as people in general. Those incidental things like catching a domestic dog that's roamed a little bit too far, or somebody's hunting dog that got out and was roaming too far. Those are the kind of things that a lot of times we don't consciously think about, but they can definitely have the opportunity to give us a major black eye in the long run. In the off the wall event that there is a run in, and that does happen. So when you're looking at these traps and the prices vary widely. And man, there are some people that are absolutely die hard, give me the cheap traps and run with them. And the one thing I'll say is, even the folks that say that buy the cheap traps and that are make some people mad, but the Duke traps are the cheap traps. They're the least cost trap that's out there, so they're the cheap traps. A lot of people are modifying those, and so once you start tacking in your modification costs and your time investment in that trap, your investment in that trap, your dollars investment in that trap is steady going up. And that's one of the reasons that I've liked the MB550s is, yep, they are more expensive, but there's no additional time or modification investment really that needs to go into those traps. And so when you're looking at traps, and I just pulled these off of a Trap and Supply website, I don't remember who now, but they're pretty similar all the way around. But and I just did a per trap price because some folks may want to just buy a handful, some folks may want to buy a half dozen. A lot of times you get a price break on either a half dozen or a dozen traps, buying them at the time. But your MB550, you're looking at $18 a trap. Number 2 Bridger dogless, you're looking at $12.95 a trap or $14.45 4-coiled. You bump up to your MB650, you're looking at $19.75 a trap, and all those are 4-coiled. And your number 3 Bridger dogless, $15.95 a trap or $17.90 a trap for the 4-coiled. And then of course you got your Dukes. Number 2 Duke offset $10 a trap. The number 3 Duke offset's $11.80 a trap. And then you got the Duke 550 offset pros for $14.95 a trap. So definitely, you look at that. That's a big wide expansion. You look at the MB550 versus number 2 Bridger. $5 a trap difference. You could buy 1.5 times the number of traps of the number 2 dogless as you can the MB550s, just in that price difference. It's definitely something to keep in mind and consider. And I will say, for kind of just getting in the game and testing the waters, I do think that number 2 Bridger dogless is a good trap. One of the things that I personally feel is an important consideration in, especially if you're just getting started, you're looking at getting started in trapping, is a night latch or a notched dog or pan. To me, that's just something that's takes some of the guesswork out and just makes things. To me, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's so easy. And if you're unfamiliar, it's called a night latch because when you set the trap and you start pulling the pan down to get the trap set how you want it, there's a notch, and when the dog clicks into the pan, you'll hear it click, and it's an audible click. And so if you were setting traps in the dark, you can do that, hear that click, and that trap's ready to fire. And that's one thing, when you are setting your traps and you're trapping, going very basic here, but when you are setting your traps, you want your pan, which is what fires the trap. That's what the animal steps on. That is your target area, is that pan. You want that thing to be level with the rest of the trap, or maybe even slightly below level with the rest of the trap. You'll notice when you set it, You know, if you push that trap, you can push that pan all the way up and push the dog in the notch fully all the way. You don't want to set the trap like that because you won't. So let me back up one step. You want that pan level, but you also want to be looking at the dog and the notch to make sure that that trap is right at the edge where the next movement it's got, that dog is coming up and the trap's firing. And so that's where, to me, the night latch comes in, because you ease it down and you hear that click, you know that trap's ready. You know the next movement of that pan, that trap's firing. If you've got too much movement in that pan, a Wiley comes through there and he steps right where you want him to step, and that pan drops a 1/4 inch and your trap hadn't fired yet, he's backing up, saying, what's going on here? Something ain't right. So you want that trap to fire at the first movement of that pan. And so, and this is what I did when I first started out with my 175 Victors, 1 3/4 Victors, is I'd hold them up and I'd eyeball and I'd ease my pan down and try to get it to where it was, you know, just hanging on right, ready to fire. And I actually filed my dogs to where they were at an angle, because a lot of times the stamped dogs of the Dukes and whatnot, they're almost kind of rounded, or they've got a little burr on them or something, so it's not a smooth, easy transition. And so, you know, and then when you're looking at it, if it's the trap's fired once and it's got a little bit of mud or dirt on it, you're trying to eyeball it and look and make sure that pan, that dog is right at the edge of that notch and getting ready to fire. And it's, you know, it's kind of frustrating, because half the time you're going to go just a little bit too far and fire your trap. Then you're starting all over. Or you're going to not quite go far enough, and you're going to see where you had a footstep in your pattern, but your pan didn't fire. Or you've got a dug up trap. And so that's where, to me, if you're a beginning trapper, just getting started, one of the things that I would put a high priority on is a night latched trap. To me, that just takes one of the potential causes of issues out. There's enough causes of issues and enough opportunities for coyotes to leave you scratching your head and pulling your hair out, that any opportunity that you can take one of those potentials away, I think is worthwhile. So, and the MB550s are night latch. The number 2 Bridger dogless. Excuse me. You know, one thing about them, the dogless, is I do kind of like those traps, the dogless style traps. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but you know, a lot of people are concerned, and I don't know. I've always heard it, but that's one of those things that just because you hear about it, you've always heard it, doesn't mean it really happens or not. You know, but you hear that if that animal steps on the dog and the trap fires, that dog can throw its foot out of the trap. Whereas if you have a dogless trap, that trap fires, there's nothing to throw his foot out of the trap. Also, if your dog is not stout on that trap, like the MB550s are a rounded dog, it will get bent. If you catch a handful of coyotes with that trap, that dog's going to get bent, and then you're sitting there trying to pound it and hammer it out. So I do think that number 2 Bridger dogless is a very good trap for a beginner trapper that's wanting to test the waters, wanting to try trapping and see how you like it. The one thing that I feel like, and it's just kind of a little bit of personal nitpickiness, but in the ones that I've had and I've tried, that night latch is a little too deep. So to me, I don't like just going with the initial click. I go with the click and then I pull it down just a little bit farther, just to make sure that there's, excuse me, just to make sure that there's that little bit of travel is taken out of that pan, so that, again, when it drops, it fires. Because I think one of the biggest issues that new trappers and trappers in general have is, or one of the biggest potential issues, one of the biggest watchouts, is that trap being bedded properly and solidly. That trap is not bedded solidly, and there's any little movement of that trap as an animal steps on it, you have a greatly increased potential for dig outs and things like that. And then, that translates directly to the pan. If you've got a whole lot of movement, a whole lot of creep, a whole lot of flop in that pan, without the trap firing, it's the same thing. You're going to get the same reaction of dig outs and refusals and things like that, because something's not right from that animal's perspective. So, anyway, that's my handful of cents on that topic. Is if you're trying to find a coyote trap or a predator trap in general, just those things to keep in mind. What are the potential other target catches that you may have? What are your state regulations allow? And that gets into not just the size of the traps, but also padded jaw or rubber jaw traps. Some states require those types of traps. So then you got that and the size. I apologize, man. Having a new baby leaves you always need some sleep, but and then definitely you've got your money investment, and how you see that, and you can, there's a thousand other things you can get into, from the modification side of things, and the laminations and offsets, center swivel. Some of these traps come already tricked out with all that, like the MB550, and most all of them you can buy in the various stages of just the stock trap, or you can get it laminated, you can get it offset, you can get it laminated and offset, and center swivel fully modified is what that a lot of times is called, four coiled. In my opinion, especially if you're trapping in the southeast, the four coil is not necessary. Just a little extra bonus goodie. I've never trapped really much in the north, where you're dealing with frozen ground and things like that. Four coil might be better suited for that, breaking through a crust of ice or something like that. But to me, the four coil is not necessary, especially in the south. There's an immediate kind of cost savings there. One other thing I'll say, especially from a beginner's perspective, is and again, I don't have much experience outside of a week trapping in Ohio with the MB650 traps. I'm a huge fan of the MB550s. The MB650s take a little getting used to, because with most traps, you have your locked jaw, which is the hot jaw, if you will, that's got the dog or the pan on it, and then you've got your loose jaw that you can flip up and adjust your pan as needed. Well, MB650 locks down both jaws, so that's good from the standpoint of it helps to give you a more solid. It may make bedding a little bit easier, although I would argue that, especially if you've got some a little bit soft dirt, having that loose jaw you can flip up and then push it down into the dirt. That makes bedding pretty quick. But anyway, but because both jaws are locked down, you either to get your pan, because the pan's night latched, to get your pan in the proper position, you either got to adjust it between the jaws, which is a recipe for getting trapped, or adjust it under the jaws, which is a little tricky. It's just not super convenient, but definitely possible. So that's just one caveat. The other ones really are pretty similar in the way they operate, in a way that you adjust them, but those MB650s are definitely a little bit different in that, having both jaws locked down. And there's other traps out there as well. There's I don't think they're being made right now, but a lot of people really like the KB 5.5. You got the No BS K9 Extremes and the K9 Extreme Juniors. Those are more high-end traps for more serious trappers, more akin to the MB550, MB650s, fully modified, ready to go right out of the box, versus some of the other ones that may not be. And that's, again, you go with you look at your Dukes or to some extent your Bridgers, unmodified Bridgers. You've got those traps will catch animals. They'll catch coyotes, no question about that. But over time, you may run into scenarios where, well, shoot, now the dog's been on this one, or something like that, where you may have to pull the trap or replace it or something. Versus if you do have one of these other a little bit beefier, more expensive traps, they're kind of beefed up in those areas, and so not as likely to need adjustment or need to be pulled. You can just keep on using it, keep on setting, keep on trucking. So anyway, I hope that kind of gives a roundabout idea. I guess kind of summarizing, in my opinion, for an ideal coyote size trap or a general predator trap, you'd be looking at a 1 3/4 or 1.7 size, 1.75 size on the small end, up to a number 3 size trap on the large end. So anywhere in between there, you got your 1 3/4, your number 2, and then your number 3, and then you got your 550, 650. I was trying to think of any other kind of odd sizes, or your K9 Extreme, your K9 Extreme Juniors. But those are just kind of a general run-of-the-mill. Number 2 and number 3 is definitely coyote predator size traps. The 1 3/4 will work. I would say it is a little bit on the small side, but plenty of folks catch coyotes and bobcats and other things in that little bit smaller area. So ultimately, most of them have a pretty similar pan size, and you got to get that critter to step on that pan regardless. He comes in, and even if he steps within the jaws, it don't matter if it's within the jaws of a number 5 or a number 3 or number 175. If you don't step close enough to hit that pan and fire that pan, it don't matter either way. So that's part of the excitement and the enjoyment of the process, though, right? I mean, that's the challenge that keeps us always coming back, because there's always something to learn with these critters. So I hope that gives you something to think about if you're a new trapper. I hope that kind of points you in the right direction. And again, you got questions, comments, shoot me an email, send me a message. I appreciate hearing from everybody. I appreciate the catch pictures that I've been getting, and I hope you are out there catching yourself. If catching animals yourself, not catching yourself, that's no fun. But stay tuned. The last 2 weeks of February, I have got a pretty good farm lined up, pretty good sized farm lined up to trap, and so the semi-live trap line videos should be coming pretty hot and heavy. I know I haven't been as hard on them this season as I have the last 2, although the Texas trap line kind of took some of that place. But again, with the growing family and all kinds of demands, work demands, and trapping demands, it's a lot going on, a lot to balance. So I'm trying to balance that the best I can. And but I am excited. I'm really excited about this property, and really getting a good trap line out. I'm excited to bring y'all along. We'll be doing that, as well as keep on with the hog trapping. So be sure to stay tuned to the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't already to Coyote Trapping School YouTube channel to be notified of those videos. You get a lot of folks that they either work at night or and they watch the my trap line videos before they get ready to run their trap line, and just kind of primes them up, or they're not able to set a trap line, and so they're kind of living vicariously watching my trap line on YouTube. So that's a pretty interesting and fun thing. But I appreciate y'all following along, supporting. If you got time, go to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. 5 stars is all that you need to leave, and be sure to take a kid trapping. How about that one? I hadn't said that in a while, but we need to encourage anyone we can that's interested. So if you get a chance, you get an opportunity to take a kid or a new person trapping on the trap line, and get them involved. Y'all have a good one. We'll talk to you next time.